one language stopped an entire genome. Finnish wasn't just spoken, it was a genetic firewall. And it separated Finland from Europe forever. What if the most genetically unique people in Europe weren't a lost tribe, weren't hidden in mountains, weren't erased by history, but were living normal lives today, modern cities, modern passports, modern Europe? And yet, when scientists placed their DNA on a genetic map of Europe, something felt wrong, very wrong. Because Finland didn't sit where it was supposed to. On the screen, France, Germany, Italy, they formed a smooth genetic line, west to east, clean, predictable. But Finland drifted away, pulled sideways, pulled east, not towards Sweden, not towards Scandinavia, but towards Siberia. And suddenly, a terrifying question appeared. How can a European population be genetically closer to people thousands of kilometers away than to their own neighbors? This wasn't a small difference. This wasn't statistical noise. Geneticists called Finland an outlier. A population that doesn't follow Europe's rules. Same continent, different story. And the deeper researchers looked, the stranger it became. Finnish DNA didn't come from one single origin, like most Europeans. It carried two histories, layered on top of each other. One familiar, one completely foreign to Europe. Most Europeans descend from farmers, hunter-gatherers, and steppe riders. But Finland had something extra, something ancient, something that shouldn't be there. A genetic echo from the northeast, from deep forests, from cold lands Europe barely remembers. And this difference wasn't abstract. It shaped disease. It shaped identity. It shaped how Finns cluster together and away from everyone else. So to understand Finland, we don't start with kings or borders. We don't start with language or flags. We rewind time, 3,000 years back. Because something entered Europe through Finland, something that quietly stopped there. It didn't spread west. It didn't rewrite the continent. It stayed. And whatever it was, it left fingerprints that science can no longer ignore. The trail does not begin in Europe. It begins far to the east, in a land of rivers and forests, between the Volga and the Oka. This is where a different kind of people lived. They did not speak Indo-European. They did not farm the land the way Europe did. They spoke Uralic languages. They moved with the seasons. They understood forests, not fields. And around 3,000 years ago, they began to move. Not all at once, not as an invasion, but slowly, quietly, generation by generation. The first wave reached toward the Baltic, around 1250 BCE. The second followed centuries later, around 800 BCE. They didn't arrive with armies. They arrived with families. And they brought something Europe had never absorbed before: genes shaped in Siberian cold, cultures built outside farming civilizations, and a language that refused to blend in. When these people entered what we now call Finland, they didn't replace everyone. They mixed with local hunter-gatherers, with steppe-descended groups already there. And in that mixing, something rare happened. A genetic signature formed that Europe would never fully absorb. Most migrations spread. This one stopped. The language stayed mostly in one corner of Europe. The genes stayed even tighter. Today, traces of that migration barely exist across the continent, except here, in Finland, in the DNA. This is why Finnish genetics contain a small but powerful Eastern component. Not dominant, but unmistakable. A ghost signal. Enough to pull an entire population off Europe's genetic axis. Enough to confuse modern science. If the mothers of Finland carried echoes of the Ice Age, the fathers carried something even stranger. When scientists traced the Y chromosomes, the unbroken line from father to son, they expected to find what most of Europe carries: 11B, 11, A1. The typical fingerprints of Indo-European expansion, steppe warriors, and Germanic bloodlines. But Finland refused to play by the rules. Instead, they found in 1C, not a whisper of it, a roar. Over 60% of Finnish men share it, a number that defies every pattern in Europe. It's not common in Germany, not in France, not in Britain, not even in Sweden. But when you zoom out, when the genetic map stretches into Siberia, there it is. Nen1C lives in the east. It runs through the forests of northern Russia, through the Komi, the Mari, the Yakuts, Uralic-speaking, cold-adapted, and ancient. This was no European marker. This was a Siberian signature, burned into Finnish blood, but it didn't come from just one road. New research revealed something far more complex. In eastern Finland, Nenwansi tells one story, a direct line from Siberia, straight into the forests. Clean, intact, heavy. But in the southwest, Nenwansi comes with a twist. It looks different, almost Baltic, almost coastal, because some N1C didn't march across land. It sailed across the Baltic, from Estonia, from the Gulf, arriving not as a wave, but as a whisper, and this dual entry carved Finland in two, east and west. Same haplogroup, different stories. At first glance, Finland looks unified. One people, one language, one national story. But the genes tell a different tale. Because when scientists measured genetic distance, they found something almost no one expected. Eastern and Western Finns, the same country, same culture, were more genetically different than Germans and British. Let that sink in. Two neighboring European nations, with different languages and histories, are closer genetically than two regions inside Finland. How is that even possible? It begins with what scientists call founder effects. You see, Finland wasn't settled all at once. It was seeded, slowly, by small groups. Sometimes just a few dozen families moving into vast empty land. These weren't migrations, they were reboots. Each new region a genetic reset. And as those settlers spread out, they didn't mix much with others. They married local, they stayed put. Over time, their genes began to repeat. Rare alleles, different versions of genes, amplified, common ones disappeared. And across the map, micropopulations formed, each with its own DNA signature. The forests, the lakes, the winters, they all acted like walls. What emerged wasn't one people, but a patchwork of subpopulations, a quilt of gene pools, frozen in time. In the east, the effect was even stronger. Later settlement. Smaller founder base, tighter bottlenecks, genes that existed nowhere else in Europe began to flourish there. You can test two Finns, one from Savonia, one from Turku, and find more genetic distance than between a Dane and a Dutchman. Same passport, different genome. In genetic terms, Eastern and Western Finns are like cousins who never spoke again. And that silence left a mark. It began quietly. A few children in a village, born with symptoms no one had names for, muscle disorders, developmental delays, a rare kidney failure that struck in the first months of life. Doctors were puzzled. The conditions didn't match any common diagnosis. They weren't in the textbooks, because outside that village, outside that region, they simply didn't exist. And when researchers finally connected the dots, they uncovered something chilling, a hidden genetic legacy. 39 rare diseases, all more common in Finland than anywhere else on Earth, a pattern so clear it earned a name, the Finnish disease heritage. And it wasn't folklore, it was biology. The same founder effects, the same bottlenecks that fractured Finland's gene pool, had also amplified mutations. Mutations that, in larger, more mixed populations, would have vanished. Here, they multiplied. Congenital nephrotic syndrome, cartilage hair hypoplasia, aspartame glucosaminuria, all ultra-rare globally, yet strangely concentrated in Finland, sometimes down to a single region, a single valley. In the rest of Europe, diseases like cystic fibrosis are common. But in Finland, they're nearly absent, because the original settlers simply didn't carry those mutations, and what they didn't carry never arrived. This isn't just genetic drift, it's natural history written in bodies, in family trees, in risk and resilience. There's a strand of DNA you don't get from your father. It doesn't mix, doesn't recombine. It travels clean, mother to child. And when scientists sequenced this mitochondrial DNA in Finnish women, they saw something extraordinary, a lineage most Europeans barely carry. Finns preserved in abundance. It's called haplogroup U5. And it's old. Older than farming, older than Indo-Europeans. It belongs to the hunter-gatherers of Mesolithic Europe, the first humans to survive the cold after the Ice Age. Today, UAF5 is rare in most of Europe. But in Finland, it thrives. 25% of Finnish women carry it, as if that ancient lineage never left. And it's not just Finns. The Sami people, who still herd reindeer in the Arctic North, carry even more. Together, They preserve a maternal line almost untouched by 9,000 years of migration. This isn't just ancestry, it's genetic time travel. While most of Europe's mtDNA was overwritten by Neolithic farmers, Finnish maternal DNA remained intact, untouched by southern expansion. It's a biological memory of a time before Europe became Europe, and it changes how we see the story. Because while Finland's paternal line reflects a migration from Siberia, the maternal line whispers of a much older world. A world where people lived in caves, hunted elk, and passed down their code through generations of daughters. So when you look at a modern Finnish genome, you're not seeing one population, you're seeing a fusion between ancient Ice Age survivors and Uralic newcomers. A convergence, frozen in place by time, geography, and language. It's easy to think of language as sound, as song, as something spoken. But in Finland, language was something else entirely. It was a shield, a border that no army could cross, because while nearly every nation in Europe spoke some form of Indo-European tongue, Germanic, Slavic, Romance, the Finns did not. They spoke Finnish, a Uralic language alien to the continent around it. No Latin roots, no shared syntax, no bridge. And that difference wasn't just academic, it was genetic. You see, language determines connection. It shapes who you trade with, who you live beside, who you marry. And for centuries, Finnish didn't just set them apart, it kept them apart. Even under centuries of foreign rule, first by the Swedish crown, then the Russian Empire, the language held in the cities. Swedish may have echoed in churches and courts, but in the deep forests, in the snow-covered villages, Finnish was survival. And where the language held, so did the bloodline. The rural population stayed rooted, tightly knit. The gene pool remained closed, generation after generation. And while other European nations absorbed waves of new ancestry, Finland sat still. It wasn't just separation, it was cultural cohesion. A decision, conscious or not, to protect something old, and scientists now believe that decision preserved more than words. It preserved genetic lineages. It preserved entire DNA profiles. Because when you don't mix, when your culture keeps outsiders at a linguistic distance, your genome carries that silence forward. Finnish wasn't just a language, it was a genetic firewall. Imagine a map, not of roads, not of borders, but of genes. A scatter of dots, each representing a population. France fades into Germany, Germany blends into Poland, Poland touches Ukraine. A smooth genetic gradient, from Iberia to the Urals. But then, a dot appears, far off the line, detached, alone. Finland, not near Sweden, not near Estonia, not even near Russia, floating in genetic space, like a forgotten island. It shouldn't be there. And yet, there it is, Europe's genetic outlier. And when you break it down, the isolation sharpens. Start with Estonia, Finland's linguistic cousin. They speak a related Uralic language. They share ancient roots. But Estonians had more contact, more mixing. Their gene pool carries fewer bottlenecks. Estonia is close, but not as close as it seems. Now look at Sweden. Centuries of shared history. Royal unions. Swedish governors in Finnish towns. But genetically, a Swede and a Finn can be told apart with 98% accuracy. Even side by side, their genomes live in different worlds. Then there's Russia, just next door. But Russians are Slavic. Their genetic story moves through different migrations, different paths. Only in a few northern areas, Karelia, Ingria, do we find echoes of shared Uralic blood. But on the whole, Russians drift west. Finns stay north. So here's the twist. Finland, surrounded by nations, tied to empires, touching both east and west, is closer to neither. It's a continent without neighbors, a genome without a cluster. We often tell Europe's story as one of waves. Waves of farmers from Anatolia, waves of warriors from the steppe, waves of empires, collapsing and rebuilding. Each wave left its mark. Each reshaped the gene pool. And today, most Europeans are descendants of those layers, a remix of migrations stacked over thousands of years. But in Finland, something older survived. Hidden beneath the steppe ancestry, beneath the Uralic migrations, beneath the language walls, lives a signal from a Europe long gone, a genome that didn't remix. It persisted. Finnish DNA carries more pre-farming hunter-gatherer ancestry than almost any other population on the continent. And it's not abstract. It's visible in the DNA, in the traits, in the mitochondrial threads passed down since the Ice Age. While the rest of Europe blended into something new, Finland held on. If the rest of Europe is a remix, Finland is the hidden original. And this original genome doesn't just tell us about the past, it may hold answers about the present, and even the future. Because traits that were once common, resistance to cold, fat metabolism, immune system patterns, may still linger in the Finnish code. And researchers now believe that rare disease genes, metabolic quirks, even longevity-linked traits could trace back to this Ice Age legacy. It's not just heritage, it's human adaptability, written in silence, across millennia. And in a world where genetic diversity is flattening, where ancient lineages are vanishing into global mixing, Finland remains a rare time capsule. This story isn't over. Because what Finland preserved through separation, language, and chance wasn't just DNA, it was information. Information that might reshape how we treat disease, how we understand migration, how we define identity. And now, that time capsule is being unlocked. At the center of this discovery is a project called FinGen, a vast biobank built not just to study disease, but to study a population that holds rare insights. Because when your gene pool is this distinct, when drift amplifies the subtle, you can see things others miss: gene-disease links, immune responses, silent traits with massive effects. And for the world, Finland may become more than a mystery. It may become a blueprint, a genetic window into what was lost elsewhere, into resilience, into risk, into the quiet power of separation. Because this isn't just a look back. It's a question. What other populations, quiet, remote, overlooked, might hold similar secrets? If Finland holds the past in its genome, what other forgotten groups might hold the future? To be Finnish is to carry a story no one else remembers. A story not written in books, but coded into cells. In the fatherlines that came from Siberia and the motherlines that walked out of Ice Age Europe, in a language that guarded the genome and a geography that froze it in place. This wasn't just survival, it was preservation. A dual origin, Uralic migrants, ancient hunter-gatherers, folded into one people. A nation shaped not by empire, but by absence, by what didn't arrive, by what didn't mix. And through that stillness, something impossible remained intact. Not just DNA, not just ancestry, but a living genetic architecture, one that modern science is only now beginning to understand. So if you've made it this far, you're not just watching history, you're decoding it. And if you want more stories like this, the ones that don't make it into textbooks, but live in bones, in blood, in breath, then you know what to do. Subscribe and keep walking deeper into the untold genome. Because history wasn't written in ink, it was written in us.